Alright guys, so in this video we're going to cover heating pads and how to rig them up and so on. So it's going to cover a lot of the basics about heating pads. This video might be a little bit boring for a lot, but you can also maybe learn a thing or two from this video. So give it a chance, but this is really meant for a lot of the beginners, and I get a lot of questions about heating pads, different heat pads, how to rig up the heat pads and all these kinds of things. So we're going to try and cover everything we can about heat pads. If there's anything I don't cover, you guys are more than welcome to ask in the comments, and I'll get to those when and if I can. Alright, so here in South Africa we don't have a lot of different options, but you get a couple different heat pads. Okay, this one here is the most common heat pad that we get. Okay, it's just like a tin foil heat pad with heat cable inside. Okay, used a lot in we use these sort of things in underfloor heating and that sort of thing as well. But in the pet trade here in South Africa, this is the most common heat pad that we're going to come across. And I really like these heat pads. They work extremely well. They're extremely safe as well. So on the back they've just got it's almost like a sticker. You just peel off this white piece and you can actually stick this heating pad to any surface you want. So it keeps it nice and safe and everything like that. So we'll show you different ways of rigging them up as well. Also, a nice thing about these heat pads is that if anything goes wrong, which doesn't happen often, I've got some running years, but if anything does go wrong and these things short out or something happens, they just pop and the circuit's broken immediately. So they are extremely safe. They've got these little points on the ends here, which are obviously where you're going to connect, say, a block connector or something, and it doesn't matter if you're putting live or neutral, either one is going to connect the circuit. So the heat pads we're using here, these are 30 watt. You get a lot of different sizes. You get the 9 watt, you get 14 watt, the same size. You even get little mini ones now. So you get quite a lot of different sizes of them. They're really good. I'm using these in most applications when using heat pad. Okay, so the other types of heat pads that you do get, which are quite popular in the market and a lot of places, is your laminated type of heating pad. Okay, this one here, this is an old second-hand heat pad, and this is quite a large laminate heat pad. You can see that you can actually cut it through here. So this one, also from underfloor heating companies. I think this one is used behind mirrors in the bathroom so that it actually doesn't steam up and fog and things like that. I don't see any houses with that, but you get some pretty fancy houses where they'll be using applications like this. Okay, now the thing with your laminated heat pads, especially your big brands like Exoterra, I think Zoomed will probably also do. I haven't seen, we don't import those in this country, but our Exoterras are quite common, and abroad Exoterra is a brilliant brand, very common. Now those heat pads, the laminated heat pads, they are meant to go underneath those glass enclosures. Okay, so if you've got an Exoterra tank, you take the Exoterra heat pad, it goes underneath the enclosure, and there's a little air space, and it gently heats that from the base. Okay, that's how those heat pads are meant to be used. You're not meant to take one of those laminated heat pads and put it in a wooden cage on the inside on the floor of the cage. Okay, reason being, I've almost had 2 fires doing it that way when I was first learning, keeping snakes, and had them on heat pads and things like that. There's nothing wrong with the heat pad itself, it's just the way that it's being used. Okay, they are not meant to be in an enclosure, they're meant to be underneath. So I can't state that enough. Okay, so what happens with the laminated type of heat pads? Okay, I'm not only saying Exoterra can be many different types, okay, is that they get extremely hot if you don't have them on a thermostat, and they can get brittle. Snake moves over it quite a lot, it gets little hairline cracks, it gets urinated, peed on, pooped on, everything. Okay, if it gets little hairline cracks because it's being moved around over the years, and as it gets hot, it gets more rigid, it can crack, moisture gets in, starts shorting it out, and that's where you get big problems. Heat pads starting to melt, burn the snake, could cause a fire if you're keeping on newspaper or certain substrates. So those laminated heat pads, excellent for underneath enclosures, especially your exoteriors. That's what they're made for. Okay, you get other types of heat pads as well. Again, haven't seen them in the country, where it's sort of like a little rubber mat. They look pretty good. Some of them even have like safety things inside them. But again, it's not something we get in South Africa, so I can't really cover those ones too much. Alright, so I think that pretty much covers our basics. Again, here in South Africa, a lot of us, we make our own enclosures out of wood. Wood is a very good insulator, so it keeps the temperatures in nicely compared to some of the glass enclosures. Okay, so a lot of us go with wooden enclosures with sliding front glass. Okay, so with using these heat pads, we do use them in the enclosures. Okay, but I'll show you now that they can get pretty warm. You could even use them underneath an enclosure and still get pretty warm. Okay, so a lot of these kind of heat pads, they come out with a general guide, as well as the exoteriors and others, of how hot these heat pads are going to get. They're always going to be like 35 and so on. Okay, that's just like an average guide, really, and it is not accurate in my opinion at all. Okay, so if the temperature is extremely cool, your heat pad is not going to get as hot. If it's 30 degrees in a room where it's like, yo, this room's really cooking, and you put on the heat pad, it's going to surpass that even more. Okay, so it really depends on your ambient air temperatures as well as how you've rigged it up. Okay, if you've got an enclosure that's sitting on a tiled floor, okay, the heat is going to be sucked out through the ground of that enclosure, because the ground is very, very cold, so your heat pad is not going to get very warm. Okay, if you have your heat pad, your enclosure lifted off the ground, obviously a lot more heat is focused up, heat does rise, it's going to get a lot warmer. Okay, so you get a lot of different temperature readings depending how you rig it up. Okay, so it's the same as if you take your heating blanket. Okay, you leave the duvet off your bed, doesn't get that warm. You leave the duvet on your bed, the heat builds up underneath and it gets extremely hot. Okay, now this is a reason why snakes can actually burn themselves on heat pads, because they go and they move and they lie on the heat pad and they think like, oh, it's nice and warm here. Okay, it's the same as us going into the sun on the beach. Oh, it's lekker, getting nice and warm. You stay out in the sun, don't feel like I'm burning, and what happens? The next day you wake up and you got sunburn, you've overdone it. Okay, same thing with reptiles, and remember, reptiles are cold-blooded. Okay, their blood moves a lot slower through the body than a warm-blooded animal, so with slow blood flow, with a bit too much heat, they can burn themselves quite easily. Now, I would say that it's not as serious if you've got a heat pad that's really hot. With a lot of your colubrids, your corn snakes, king snakes, certain rat snakes and things, they move off, they don't get burnt often. I haven't really seen them burnt. Okay, but your boids, your boas and your pythons, they feel warmth, they lie there and they're like, this is great, and they can end up burning themselves. Okay, especially when a heavy body animal is lying on the heat pad, the heat's just building up underneath, building up, building up, building up, and that's how they can get really bad burns. I've seen some really bad burns from people through WhatsApp and on the internet and all that. If you Google burns with reptiles, it is quite a common occurrence, and that's why it is extremely important to have a thermostat. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick look at these heat pads, and we're going to got a temp gun here. We're going to have a look and see what sort of temperatures we're getting. So here we've got just a heat pad on its own, just sitting on this plastic table. Now, the reason I put this masking tape over here is because with the temp guns, depending on what surface you're actually measuring a temperature of, you can get very slightly different readings, and obviously with something that's reflective like this, it can maybe interfere. So that's just a plain heat pad, which a lot of people might do, just stick that on the bottom of an enclosure. Problem with doing this sort of method is, you know, you're going to get snake defecating all over this, and you're going to try and clean it. It's going to just get a bit problematic and messy and damage the heat pad. Okay, second one we've got is a tile with the exact same heat pad underneath. This is the 30 watt heat pad, as I mentioned. Okay, also with a little piece of tape there, and you can see the tile is the same size as the heat pad. Okay, now this one here, exactly the same as this one. We've just got an insulation underneath it, so that we're trying to focus more heat up into the heat pad. Okay, these two, you don't ever want to do this in your enclosure. This is just a way of showing you sort of temperature differences. I don't think we're going to get too much of a temperature difference, and that might have a lot to do with this plastic table, which is kind of hollow. Whereas if this was a wooden desk, again, it would be sucking a lot of heat out of the heat pads. Okay, and then this one here is a twice the size tile, okay, with the heat pad just down here through the middle. Okay, this is what I would recommend using inside an enclosure to protect it. Again, we might be getting still high temperatures, but let's have a look and see what we've got. Okay. So we're doing this all in Celsius. Okay, so we got 47. Now anywhere from 40 degrees you're looking at a potential burn. Okay, so 47 degrees, 43 if I'm not shooting on the cables, 45, but if I shoot on the cables, 47.8 degrees. That is very, very hot. Okay, we can go over to the tile here. That's 44. It's going to be very average. Okay, obviously with this one, with each cable, okay, it's much hotter than where the aluminium is. Aluminium is very good for spreading heat. Okay, I mean, you could use a heat pad this size with a massive sheet of aluminium, and it'll actually spread the heat quite nicely through that. Same as like a frying pan. A lot of the time they use alloys and aluminium in the frying pans. It helps to spread the heat nice and evenly. Okay, so this one here we're seeing getting about 43 degrees. Now I used this rig for a racking system that's also on the YouTube channel. You guys can check it out. And the reason I'll do that is because I need a very hot surface, and I had an airspace, and then I had the bottom of the enclosure, so I needed something that's going to get very hot to get through into the racking unit. That's why I went with that system. Okay, so that one is 45, 46, okay, 46 degrees, also extremely hot. Okay, that's going to burn an animal badly, but again, we don't use it this way inside the enclosure. A lot of people also use a piece of glass, a pane of glass. That's going to be the same thing. It might even get hotter. Okay, and then we've got the larger tiles, probably going to be around the 40s in the middle as well. Okay, it's 44, and on the edges it's got 26, 32. Okay, so it gives a nice dissipation of heat throughout. Okay, the table itself is just 25 degrees, and if we shoot underneath the table, we've got 34. Now that's a little bit better, but still it's quite warm for a lot of species. Okay, so guys, this is exactly why you need to get thermostats, so that you can control the temperature of these heat pads. Okay, heat pads in themselves, with the sort of ratings they have, it's not accurate. Okay, now another thing when it comes to substrate, okay, we've got some husk here. This is just cocoa husk chips. It's very airy, spongy substrate. And then we've got some bark here, which is a little more heavy. Okay, so heat is going to struggle to get through this a lot more than it would with the bark. And same with sand. Sand's going to get even hotter than these two. Okay, so again, you're putting sand over one of these, it's going to get extremely hot. And the snake's lying on the top, which you measure the temperature, you think, oh no, this is good, it's not too warm. And the snake, what it wants, I want more heat, is going to start shuffling down. Okay, it seems a bit silly, but snakes do funny things. And then it can get extremely hot, it can burn itself. Okay, so also your substrates can make a big difference. Normally, if I'm going with a very good layer of husk, you know, you can set a thermostat and set this heat pad to about 35 degrees if we're talking about a python or a boa. Okay, once it gets through the husk, it's maybe going to be more around the 30 degree mark or 32 degrees, which is quite nice as a basking spot for a lot of boids. Okay, if the snake does move it out the way and shuffle down onto the heat pad, it's not the end of the world. 35 degrees is not going to cook or burn that animal. Okay, so again, it really depends how you rig up the heat pads. So what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to rig up some different size heat pads, lower wattages, to see what differences we get here. I'm going to leave it to run for 24 hours, and then we're going to come back to see what sort of temperatures we've got. I can probably get the same temperature readings within about 2 hours or whatever. Everything's going to sort of stabilize. We'll see how it goes. If the temperatures are not still going up, I'll maybe start then, but I want to see to rig them up differently as to what temperatures we're going to get. Okay, so remember, these are all 30 watt, which is a very warm heat pad, okay, under quite extreme conditions. Right, so here we've got a little 9 watt heat pad. Now, I mean, 9 watts is not a lot of wattage, but I'm going to see what temperatures we get here. Come on, 44, 43, it's also just as hot. 40, 40, okay, 28 on the outer edges. So you can see extremely hot. There's even a little, okay, now this one underneath here is a 14 watt. It's getting the same temperature pretty much, a little bit cooler than the 30 watt, but that's the big sort of heat pad, the medium size, which we tested earlier. So you guys, as you can see, it's really important to have thermostats. I'm going to do one more test where I'm actually going to see, I'm going to put a piece of wood or something on the ground, and we're going to see what temperature differences we maybe get that way. Alright, so we're on to the last test. So we just got this wooden board on the concrete floor with the same sort of rig up of the heating pads. I did one change which I'll tell you guys about now. So if we look at the floor, temperature is 23 degrees. Okay, so the heat pad's at 40, 38, which is pretty close to what it was when it was on the table. Okay, this one 34. Now that's actually quite a nice temperature. No animal's going to burn itself. 35. So with a bit of substrate on there, it'll be fine. But I mean, you can see how much we have to play around to get things right here. Okay, now this one 33, 32. Okay, that's a really nice sort of temperature. And what I did with this one is I placed these little sponge, you know, you get the sponge where you can stick to things, an adhesive sort of sponge, and that's so that it's sitting just above the heat pad, so there's nice gentle flow onto the tile itself, so that can work quite nicely as well. And then this one here is the 14 watt, which is the medium size pad, and we've got 36 degrees. So I must say I'm quite surprised that you know, how hot they still get even in contact with the ground and everything like that. And again, shows you why we need thermostats. But just quite an interesting test. I thought we were going to get a lot more variation in our temperatures. But you can see how nicely it works with the tile. You get that nice temperature throughout, spread through the tile. Alright, so now that you guys have a better understanding about heat pads and depending on what they're in contact with and how you rig them up as to what temperatures you can get, this is why it's extremely important to have things like thermostats. Okay, nowadays with the technology and the developments that we've got, they are extremely affordable. I mean, something like this we're selling for 160 Rand at retail, which is really cheap, and they're actually really good quality. Okay, we've got many different brands that look like these, all of them pretty good and fairly accurate. This is the Ringder, and we've got STC 1000, and then you get even fancy units like this, which is your thermostat, which is dimming the power rather than turning it on and off. So not really necessary for heat pads unless you want to set a day and night temperature and so on, but we've got a video all about that unit if you want to check that unit out. Okay, so the things are extremely affordable nowadays. I mean, back in my day, you know, when I started getting into reptiles about 20 years ago, a thing like little unit like this was like 700 or 800 rand. Okay, and there was not many people selling thermostats, or they weren't very freely available in South Africa. So nowadays we've got these really affordable. So always remember, if you're going to get a Reptile, you know, you want to first make sure how much is a cage, what am I going to need in that cage heating wise. Okay, going to need a controller, and then go looking at, okay, what animal can I afford. Don't go, oh, I've got a budget of so much, I can afford this and this beautiful animal, whether it be a mutation or whatever, and then, oh, I need to go look for a second-hand cage and I'll just chuck a heat pad in it. Okay, this is extremely important so that you can look after those animals properly as well. So you need to make sure you've got temperature control. Okay, as I say, especially with the voids and things like that. Alright guys, so I really thought that we were going to get quite a lot more temperature variation doing this test, but I mean, I just wanted to show you for what it is. And we must always remember as well that environmental temperatures are going to play a bigger role, I think, in this sort of case. So I mean, I can't change the weather or the heat of the room that we're in. It's a very big space. So I mean, if it was like 28 degrees in here, we might be getting temperatures surpassing the 40s. Okay, so always very important, use a thermostat. And then another thing, when testing temperatures, I get a lot of the time where people say, you know, they put their hand on the heat pad and they feel that it's nice and warm. We must remember that our body temperature is like 36 degrees. Okay, we are warm-blooded. So for us to feel something that's warm to us, to our hand, it has to be higher than 36 degrees. Okay, a lot of the time, if we've got something which is controlled at like 28 degrees and you put your hand on it, it doesn't feel like it's really that warm at all. Okay, and that's why you need things like temp guns and so on. But again, in conclusion to this video, this shows you guys how important it is to actually have thermostat temperature control on your heating devices. Okay, remember, obviously heat pads, they're mostly made for terrestrial species that are going to be in contact with the warm surface. Okay, your ambient air temperatures, you're going to have to change with lights or heat emitters, heat projectors, all these kinds of things, which we will cover in further videos. Hope you guys enjoyed. Please subscribe and share.